The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.
I will be the moderator. I'll be asking the questions. The questions were submitted to me by email from our committee members, and I have put them kind of together in a topic format, and each gentleman here will be given 8 to 10 minutes to do their opening and tell you about themselves and why they think they're the most qualified and why you should vote for them and maybe what their agenda is if elected. And then we will start our question and answer period. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then a follow-up at additional 2 minutes. And then when we finish with our Q&A, they will each be given 5 to 8 minutes to give their closing remarks. And that'll be how our agenda works. So we're going to try to hold this down to about 8 o'clock, about an hour and a half, and see if we can't get out of here. So my lovely wife, Rebecca, will be our timekeeper tonight to keep me on track and make sure that nobody's getting extra time. And with that, I'm going to randomly call in a different order, so nobody's always first or nobody's always last. And so we'll try to make this as fair as possible. So with that, our first topic and our first question is, and it'll be for you, Mr. Davis, first, Mr. Hatcher second, and Mr. Mills third on the first question, is what will you do to curb the amount of drug-related crime, including the number of drug user overdoses in Henry County? And you can come here to the podium and answer. Thank you, sir.
First, I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Phillips, for hosting this, and thank you to everyone who come here. It's truly a blessing, and it's amazing to see the support that's come out, the people who care about the future of the Sheriff's Office and the safety of this community. And thank you for everyone who come here to spend your evening with us. On that topic of drug dealing in our community, it's not only an issue in our community here in Henry County, but it's an issue in every community across this country. Every day, there are truckloads of fentanyl that come across our southern border and pours in every community across this country. We will do our part here in Henry County to continue to combat that. In fact, since January of 2020, the Henry County Sheriff's Office has executed numerous search warrants on the homes of drug dealers and arrested those drug dealers and put them in prison for lengthy periods of time. Those seizures resulted in the substantial quantities of methamphetamine, marijuana, fentanyl, cocaine, and well over $1 million in seized drug dealer cash and assets has been put right back here into the Henry County Sheriff's Office thanks to the work of our hard men and women. In that same time period, we have already arrested over 500 drug dealers for the distribution and possession offenses since January of 2020. Over the past few years, the newly implemented minimum mandatory sentencing for methamphetamine has helped with those offenses. But I support minimum mandatory sentencing, and I believe that the sheriff needs to be willing to work with our legislators in Richmond to implement the same minimum mandatory sentences that we've seen for other drug-related offenses, and even greater sentences for those who choose to distribute fentanyl on our streets and poison our people. And I assure you there's no candidate in this sheriff's race that understands the impact that drugs have on a family better than I do. You'll have to forgive me, but in 2013, I lost my very own sister to a drug overdose. So we will continue to fight hard to take drug dealers off of this street. I do believe that without drug dealers, we won't have drug addicts, and that's the first step to that. So every day, the men and women of this Henry County Sheriff's Office, once every morning and once every evening, they will mount up, they will roll out, and they will aggressively pursue drug dealers on the streets of this community. We've done so for many years, and we will continue to do so with ever-increasing efforts. Thank you.
And so let me pause you because I made a mistake. I asked you a question before I let you do your opening.
I'm just following instructions.
I know. I was faulty, and so that's my fault. So I'll tell you what, that was your answer to that question. If you would like to go ahead with your opening statement, and then I'll have you come back at it again, and we'll get going again. I apologize. My apologies. So, Mr. Hatcher, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Darrell Hatcher, and I reflect the same sentiments that Wayne Davis does. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight, express your interest in this race, the support that you're giving your candidates, and the citizenship that you're demonstrating for Henry County. It's true patriots that get involved in these types of situations and let their voices be heard, and I appreciate every one of you being here. For 43 years, I've provided public safety service to the citizens of the Commonwealth, more specifically to Martinsville and Henry County. Since 1980, when I first joined the Philadelphia Collinsville Rescue Squad, while I was still in high school, and I've got my EMT certification in 1981, I started my public safety journey. So I've had a total of 43 years of service as an EMT and a paramedic, and also served various leadership roles with that department, with the Philadelphia Collinsville Rescue Squad. I've served as junior officers in that department. I've also served as a captain, president, and I'm still a life member and an active member with the squad. In 1984, I was hired by the Henry County Sheriff's Office to be a dispatcher. What many of you don't know is prior to 1984, in 1982, I volunteered to be an explorer with the Henry County Sheriff's Office. And it was in that position that I learned how to be a dispatcher. And the men and women of the Sheriff's Office trained me to be a dispatcher and do it well. So much so that in 1982, while I was a senior in high school, Sheriff Rogers sent me to the police academy. I attended the dispatcher's training in Salem. State police lost their minds when it came time to turn in your identification so you could get your certificate, when they realized that they had just certified a 17-year-old to have access to VSIN and NCIC. It's through the graciousness of Sheriff Rogers that I was able to complete the training, and I was given my certification eventually by the state police. So in 1984, Sheriff Rogers contacted me when he had an opening for a dispatcher. And of course, I accepted the position and came to work. And many of the faces I see in the room worked with me in the sheriff's office then. In 1986, I took a job as a correctional officer as a promotion when I turned 21. And I worked in the jail here, just right across the parking lot, for a couple of years there. Then in 1988, I took a job as a game warden with the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. In those days, you couldn't live in the same county, or you couldn't work in the same county that you lived. So I had to relocate. So I rolled the dice because when you applied, you didn't know where you were going. And I was assigned to Bedford County, straight out of the academy. So I went to work for them because I liked working outdoors. I liked being one of 188 officers that protected the state. There's very few people that were selected, and the process was enduring. It took almost a year and a half to go through the selection process. So my primary work areas then was Bedford, Franklin, and Pittsylvania counties. So I worked those three counties, Smith Mountain Lake. What a surprise it was in 1990 when I was selected to be on a drug task force. Who in the world would select a game warden to be on a drug task force? Evidently, Governor Wilder at the time thought it was a good idea, and it actually proved to be very beneficial. So every department that had state jurisdiction or statewide jurisdiction had to give up officers to the task force. Game and Inland Fisheries gave up 2, ABC gave up 4, state police gave up 8. And so we had 2 teams that worked the state. I worked the western half, another team worked the eastern half. So for 5 years, I worked as a narcotics officer. I went to training at the State Police Academy for basic narcotics investigations, advanced narcotics investigations, interdictions, drug trafficking investigations, drug identification, and other courses related to drug work. We were assigned to go out and work with local sheriff's departments to help them combat drugs. Also through those years, I attended the DEA Academy, where I learned how to do advanced narcotics investigations. So for those 5 years, that's primarily what I focused on. While I was still in Bedford County, I also became a member of Moneta Rescue Squad, where I eventually rose to the level of captain there. And Moneta is located right on Smith Mountain Lake. So we patrolled that area. We did fire and EMS or rescue calls on the lake for the years that I lived there. In 1995, the Drug Task Force was discontinued, and I went back to a daily patrol as a game warden. Had to transition from plainclothes to uniform work. And in 95, I was transferred back to Henry County. The game warden here had been promoted, and they couldn't keep a game warden here. They kept going every 6 months or so. Somebody would come here and they would leave. So they asked me to transfer back to Henry County, and that's when I came back. While with the game department, I completed certification courses as a criminal justice instructor, where I taught at the police academies in Lynchburg, I taught at the State Police Academy, and I taught at other academies across the state. Primarily taught first responder EMT to police officers. It was an unheard of program that we had started with Game and Fish, where we trained all the game wardens to be first responder EMTs. We were one of the first statewide EMS agencies in the Commonwealth. Other courses that I taught in the academy was emergency vehicle operations, hunting accident investigations, boat accident investigations, and officer survival. I also taught motor vehicle theft investigations as part of the academy program. So I continued my instruction at the police academies even after I came back here. I applied for and became a field training officer for the game department, where I helped other officers learn the profession. I helped them survive. I taught them the basics of what it took to be a game warden. Other courses that I completed around that time was death scene investigations and cold case investigations. I took those at Liberty University as part of an effort with the Bedford County Commonwealth Attorney's Office, where I learned how to investigate homicides, death scenes, and any type of fatalities. Breath alcohol operator testing, hunter education instructor, was also a boater safety instructor. So as you can see, the theme throughout my entire career has been, I taught others how to do their job, I taught others how to succeed in their job, and I worked with them to make sure they excelled at their job. So while I was here, I also began taking classes in emergency management and also in preparedness, as well as firefighter training. In 2006, I was offered a position as the Director of Public Safety for Franklin County. In that position, I went from being a field game warden to an executive manager overnight, where I went from being a field game warden to a supervisor. I'd been offered positions in leadership with the game department, but declined them because I didn't want to move. I loved Henry County that much, and I didn't want to leave the area. But Franklin County, when I took over that position, I became an executive manager for a county department where I had to oversee all fire and EMS operations, all fire marshal operations, which included arson investigations and fire investigations, animal control operations. The sheriff didn't do animal control in Franklin County, public safety did. So I had 2 animal control officers and managed the animal shelter. Also, all the fire and EMS training in the county, as well as I became the emergency management coordinator for Franklin County. Emergency management coordinator drafts the emergency planning for all of the county so that we can respond to disasters. As part of that, I oversaw capital budgets and operational budgets in the millions of dollars. Anywhere between $5 and $6 million is where we averaged. I took a department of 20 members or 20 employees, and by the time I retired in 2017, we were up to 80 employees. Part of what I did there is I expanded the operations of the department, improved fire insurance ratings for Franklin County. I oversaw natural disasters, or the recovery from natural disasters, where we had the derecho that hit Franklin County. It's the first chance I had to test my emergency planning abilities. After I rewrote the county's operational plan to an all hazards approach, it was the first chance we had to test it, and it was successful. We had 70% of the county that was affected by that storm, and we had them back up and operational within 7 days. The biggest project I completed was a $13 million public safety radio completion project, or where I
Finish that sentence.
Okay.
That'll be your time. Thank you.
where I oversaw the county's efforts to replace the entire public safety radio system. It took us 2 years to do that. And it replaced every radio in Franklin County for all fire, EMS, and law enforcement.
Thanks, sir. Thank you. Mr. Mills, and if you want to give your opening statement. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dale Mills, and I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and speak. And one thing I have found over the course of the last 2.5 months, the most difficult thing to talk about is yourself. You would think it would be really easy and you could ramble all evening, but I find it to be very difficult. I try to be humble, but I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. I was born and raised here in Henry County. I'm a graduate of Bassett High School. After graduation, I joined the military. I'm an Army veteran. I was trained at Fort Jackson, Fort Gordon, Georgia, at the Signal Corps, completed the instructor training school, and served overseas. From there, I returned home and I received my degree from Patrick Henry College in General Studies, and I also have a degree in Criminal Justice. At that point, I was fortunate enough to be hired by the Henry County Sheriff's Office, where I began my 25-year career. The first 12 years of my career were in the correctional unit. I found it to be very rewarding. It's a place where you learn and you grow. I left the correctional unit as a sergeant, a shift supervisor. From there, I went to patrol and then continued as an evidence technician, to a school resource officer, which I found to be extremely rewarding. Building those rapport with the students, our youth of the county, it was very important. And those are bonds and relationships that continue even today. I finished my career in civil process. In 2019, I'm sorry, I've got to backtrack one moment. I was a SWAT member, active shooter instructor, and served on the honor guard while a member of the Henry County Sheriff's Office. In 2019, following my retirement, I served as a co-director for a nonprofit here in Henry County, where I gained valuable skills and knowledge in budgeting, grant writing, and volunteer coordinating. I'm a Christian. I lend strongly to my faith, and that faith is service that I'd like to continue to my country and the citizens of Henry County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mills, and I do want to apologize to Mr. Davis for giving you errant instructions there, but I will, if you want to come back and give your opening statement at this time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. As we get back on track here, as we get back on track, I'd like to share a little bit about myself tonight. I was born here in Henry County. I've lived here my entire life. I grew up in the Ridgeway community. In fact, I was raised by my grandmother. And my grandmother worked hard to provide for us, but we lived a life of meager financial means. And my upbringing is representative of many others in this community. And it's through those life experiences that I can share the plights of many community members right here in Henry County. And it's by God's grace that I stand before you tonight as the Chief Deputy of the Henry County Sheriff's Office, and I seek to be elected as sheriff in November of this year. My wife and I have been married for 17 years, and we have a wonderful and incredible 7-year-old son. He's here with us tonight. And we both chose careers to serve others in this community. And we work daily to instill values into our son. The values of hard work, respect, compassion, and serving others himself, so that one day he'll become a productive citizen of this community himself. As a family, we enjoy many outdoor activities. We like to ride horses, camp, hunt and fish, just like many other people of our community. And we've been a member of Osborne Baptist Church for nearly a decade. and we believe in the principles of God, family, and career. The message I present to you tonight will be a message of experience and proven leadership. I began my career with the Henry County Sheriff's Office at just 21 years old, and I have served the citizens of Henry County for the past 23 years consecutively. And during those 23 years, I've been promoted to and successfully held every rank in the Henry County Sheriff's Office, from deputy, corporal, sergeant, investigator, lieutenant, captain, major, and now I serve as the colonel and your chief deputy. When I served as the captain of investigation, that's an administrative level job, and I had many duties, overseeing your school resource officers to keep your school safe, your vice division that takes these drug dealers off the streets. In those 23 years, I've served this community with honor, integrity, and sacrifice. And there is no one who understands that sacrifice better than those who have served alongside me, many here tonight, and thank you, and my family who has experienced that sacrifice firsthand. In addition to my daily duties, I've taken on every collateral duty possible in the Sheriff's Office. I served a brief time on the Honor Guard. I served over a decade on the Sheriff's Office dive team, where I attained the level of professional dive master. I rose to the rank of team commander, where I commanded that team. I also served 21 years on the Sheriff's Office SWAT team, where I again spent half of that time in a leadership role and rose to the rank of team commander, where I commanded 25 deputies on that team. I've served as the internal affairs investigator, where I take pride that was tasked with keeping this profession honest and maintaining the integrity of it. And I've served as the public information officer to keep our community informed. During my 23 years at the Henry County Sheriff's Office, I've never been subject to a disciplinary action. In fact, I will make my personnel records public to anyone. That includes all previous performance evaluations. That includes my training records. And this is the definition of candidate transparency, and I encourage anyone else to do the same. The trajectory of my career has been nothing less than progression and service to this community. Again, in addition to my primary duties, I've served most of my career as a law enforcement educator. I hold instructor certifications in general instruction, firearms instruction, defensive tactics, law enforcement sniper operations, both law enforcement and civilian response to active shooter emergencies. And I've taught officers across this region a multitude of topics, including criminal investigations, crime scene technology, how to respond to active shooter emergencies, officer survival tactics, of which I actually was instrumental in developing our first officer survival courses for our local training academy to help ensure that each of these men and women come home safe to their families daily. I teach firearms, defensive tactics, and I've taught nearly every sniper and precision rifle course in this region for almost a decade. Not to mention the SWAT tactics, the literal dozens upon dozens of SWAT operators that keep this entire region of Virginia safe came through the course that I developed and taught. Throughout my career, I've strived to grow my professional education. At this point, I've attended over 2,000 hours of training courses. That training expands investigative work, crime scene technology, tactical operations, supervision, and executive level management. I graduated from the Virginia Forensic Science Academy School of Crime Scene Technology. And just last month, I was presented by the Virginia Sheriff's Institute their certification award, which makes me one of only 101 deputies across this Commonwealth to ever receive that honor. In order to serve as sheriff of Henry County, you must first understand what it means to be sheriff. You must know the duties of the sheriff. The office of the sheriff is a constitutional position that's empowered by the state constitution rather than state law. The function of the sheriff predates all other elected positions in the United States, and it's an important position. In fact, it's the oldest non-military law enforcement entity in history. The sheriff is elected by the people, for the people, and is accountable to the people. And the sheriff of Henry County is directly accountable to every citizen of this community. The sheriff swears an oath to support the Constitution of the United States of America. And I believe in the Constitution of the United States, and I revere the Constitution above all else. A sheriff must be deeply aware of their constitutional powers, along with the constitutional powers of the government that enacts the laws that they're tasked with enforcing. The sheriff is accountable to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And as your sheriff, I will support and protect the constitutional rights of every citizen of Henry County. The sheriff and their deputies are the literal, living, daily application of the Constitution, and they are the embodiment of law and order. This community, like every community across this nation, needs law and order for liberty to exist. It's the job of the sheriff to ensure that law enforcement stands between its citizens and the criminals who choose to prey on their citizens. And I assure you that I am the sheriff that will draw that line. The sheriff and his deputies are charged with enforcing already existing laws as prescribed by the Code of Virginia. It's very specific. The sheriff shall enforce the law or see to it that the law is enforced and assist the law as prescribed by general order. In order to fulfill these duties of enforcing the law or ensuring the law was properly enforced, the sheriff must understand the law. And my experience at the Henry County Sheriff's Office puts me at the absolute forefront of this requirement. I'm running as an independent candidate because I believe and I know that I will be a sheriff for all citizens of this county. Law enforcement falls under the executive branch of government and is responsible for enforcing statutes set by our legislative branch. With that being said, there's little room in law enforcement for political interpretations. As your sheriff, I will serve every member of this county, regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic status, or political affiliation. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Davis. And again, I apologize for messing you up there in the beginning.
The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.
What will you do to curb the amount of drug-related crime, including the number of drug user overdoses in Henry County? So if you want to answer that, you have 2 minutes to answer that, then I'm going to ask you a small follow-up question to give you 1 minute. That's the second question up there, and I'll read it for you. Thank you.
In regards to the drug-related crime activity in Henry County, what everybody needs to know is that Henry County is probably one of the leading areas for drug overdoses in the entire state. I agree with Mr. Davis's opinion and his actions that we are going to combat drugs at every level. But one thing that some people may not understand is that in order to successfully combat addiction, is you have to first understand what addiction is. Addiction is a medical condition, but it's a criminal addiction. So if you buy, possess drugs, of course you violated the laws in Virginia. Opioids especially. That's the worst addiction that we've seen in this community. So we're going to combat drugs by going after everyone, from the street dealers to the manufacturers to the suppliers. We're going to petition the General Assembly, state representatives for tougher laws to take these predators off the street, the people who take advantage of those that are addicted. But we also have to offer some compassion, and we have to enforce the law with empathy. We have to give users the opportunity, when they're caught and they're apprehended, the opportunity to heal from their addiction. So we have to approach it in multiple directions at multiple levels. We have to combat the addiction, we have to combat the distribution, and I will do that as your sheriff.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. And so, do you have any specifics on what you think you would do differently than the current sheriff's office? Are there things or programs you think you would continue to do like the current sheriff's office?
We will still aggressively go after drugs, but instead of targeting drug distribution based on the amount of asset forfeiture we're going to take, we would target them based on the number of dealers we're going to take off the street. We're going to go after drug houses. We're going to go after drug sales. We're going to take the street dealers off the market. By eliminating them from society and those predators, we're going to make the community safer. We're also going to offer work with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to offer drug court for anybody who's eligible, for those who are addicted who get caught up in these arrests. We're going to offer drug court so that they can work their way back out of their addiction and give them an opportunity to cure their addiction, so that those that try to seek to purchase the drugs, we can reduce those in number, and those that distribute the drugs, we can put them in prison.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. And so, Mr. Mills, I'll give you the same question. What will you do to curb the amount of drug-related crime, including the number of drug user overdoses in Henry County? Thank you, sir.
Thank
And then I'll return for the second.
I think Mr. Davis and Mr. Hatcher, you hit some valid points. As of 2022, Henry County ranked as one of the highest counties in the state for drug overdose deaths. Drugs in our community, it's a problem. It's a real issue that we've got to be concerned with. As far as going after low-level drug dealers, you must. You take every opportunity to combat drug activity. One thing I will mention, community awareness. As far as neighborhood watch, something as simple as a neighborhood watch association that can send information to a sheriff's office that's transparent and open, so you know where to allocate your resources. You know, an example of that could be anything from a drug house to a lot of activity in a particular location as far as cars going in and out. That's information that the sheriff's office needs. That's information that a community needs to be willing to give and feel that they have an ear at the office, someone to listen to them, their concerns, someone who will react to those concerns. Something that goes hand in hand with drug use oftentimes is mental illness. There are programs within our community and treatment options to help these people, to help combat this issue. And this could help bring down the level of drug activity and drug use within our community.
And then, thank you. And the second part of that question is, do you have any specifics on what you think you would do differently than the current administration, the current sheriff's office, or are there things in addition that you would continue to do like the current sheriff's office? Okay.
Something I want to take a few moments to really reiterate that point of a neighborhood watch, okay? Strong, organized, you're the eyes and ears of the sheriff's office. You gather information. I'm not asking the community to do law enforcement work. I'm asking you to be observant. I'm asking you to be confident in a sheriff's office that you can report this information to. A sheriff's office that will help to educate you on the means to gather this information and to report this information. It can be very beneficial for the entire community.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mills. So, Mr. Davis, obviously I prematurely ask you to answer the question before you gave your opening statement, so I will have you come back and answer the second part of the question, since I didn't ask it to you earlier, if that's okay, which is the same question: what will you do to curb the amount of drug-related crime, including the number of drug user overdoses in Henry County? The second part of that question is, do you have any specifics on what you think you would do differently than what you guys are doing now in the sheriff's office, or are there things or programs you would continue to do like they currently are?
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. I do have some rebuttal. It's for the drug court that was mentioned. But just so everyone knows, that drug court is already in existence. It's up and running. The men and women from our correctional facility handle that daily. So that program already exists, and we have some success stories that's come from it already. And with the Neighborhood Watch, that program already exists too. And in fact, we're partnering with the National Sheriff's Association. And we have the most current and up-to-date Neighborhood Watch program available. It's up to the communities, and we will deliver that to any community that asks for that. And it will help combat drug violence. And one of the other things that I was concerned about is recently there's been some false information that was disseminated online that stated that Henry County was #1 in the state in fatal overdoses. And quite simply, that's not true. In fact, I have the most recent numbers from the Virginia Fusion Center that cover the Roanoke Valley, which is Division 6. I looked at those numbers today. Henry County is ranked #6 in the Roanoke Valley, so there's absolutely no way we can be ranked #1 across the Commonwealth of Virginia. We do have a problem. We'd like to not be ranked at all, but that requires us to continue to aggressively pursue drug dealers and get them off of our streets.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.
Our second question is regarding violent gun crime. What do you think the answer is to stop or to at least curb violent gun-related crime in Henry County? And I'm going to start with Mr. Mills on this for 2 minutes.
Violent gun crime, that's a problem that's plagued every community for years. It's nothing new. It's nothing that's just come about. It gets publicized daily. I read an article over the past Memorial Day weekend. There were 20 mass shootings across the United States. That's a shame. Education, awareness. There has to be laws, there are laws in place that can help to curb this, to keep the right people into acquiring firearms. There's a process you go through. So, again, education, teaching our children early is an important step on gun safety. And I think that's where it begins.
Thank you, sir. And the second part of that question would be, do you have any specifics on what you would do differently possibly than the current sheriff's office, or are there things or programs in place currently that you would continue to use?
Currently, the laws in place, I'm sure that the sheriff's office is enforcing them to the best of their ability. And again, I would just like to encourage awareness, education. I think that's the first step in curbing gun violence.
Thank you, sir. And I'll go to Mr. Davis second on this one and Mr. Hatcher third. So to Mr. Davis, what do you think the answer is to stop or to curb gun-related crime in Henry County? 2 minutes.
Once again, I would have to say that the men and women of the Henry County Sheriff's Office every day aggressively patrol your streets. And each year we bring a high number of gun-related charges to people across Henry County. I agree that we have to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. But many of those laws already exist, but they're criminals for a reason, because they don't obey the law. And while those laws exist, we need to work with our legislators in Richmond, because I truly believe that minimum mandatory sentencing is a big piece of this puzzle. When we take minimum mandatory sentencing and we lock away these criminals for lengthy periods of time, I think it sends a message. One, it takes them off the street so they cannot reoffend anymore. And it sends a message to their criminal co-parts. Don't commit that crime in the Commonwealth of Virginia or you'll go to prison for a long time. I think that's the key to reducing gun violence across this Commonwealth, is to lock away those offenders who would tend to use firearms to prey upon our citizens. We've recently attained federal grant funding that we will bring just on May the 11th. We're proud to say that we applied for and we received $361,000 in federal grant funding specifically for the purpose of fighting violent crime. So we will bring an array of new tools and technology to our streets coming shortly. So that's already been taken care of and it's on the way. Thank you.
And the second part of that question, which I know is a little different for you maybe since you're in the administration currently, but do you have any specifics on what you may do differently if you're elected sheriff than what the current sheriff's office does, or other programs that you would keep that were currently in place?
Again, I would say I believe in the work that the men and women of the Henry County Sheriff's Office do every day, and we will ensure their hard work continues. And the only thing we will do different is we will implement the new tools from this recently received grant funding to bring these new technologies to the Henry County.
As a game warden, I know that about 98% of the people that I encountered had firearms on a daily basis. Of those 98% of the hunters out there, they would never think of using a firearm in a violent fashion toward another human being. They're responsible gun owners, and that's what I found in Henry County. There's plenty of responsible gun owners out there. You're not gonna keep guns out of violent criminals' hands by doing background checks, because they don't go to any place where they require background checks when they purchase them. So I agree with Mr. Davis on that point. The criminals are criminals. They're gonna find a way to get a gun if they want one. So the only way you're gonna keep them out of their hands is the tougher sentencing, mandatory minimums, put them in jail, lock them away, because those are the predators and those are the people that keep committing the crimes. Too often we find ourselves out there having to arrest the same people over and over and over again for the same crimes because they're not getting mandatory sentences, they're not getting severe enough sentences when we do go to the effort and risk our lives to apprehend them. So the courts have to do their part of the job as well, and they have to stick with the sentence and put these people away so that we can eliminate the violence off the streets.
Thank you, sir. And the second part of that question is, do you have specifics on what you think you would do differently possibly than the current administration, and if there are things you would keep that they're currently doing to stop gun violence?
The only thing I would offer that they would do differently would be to do saturation patrols. If we have areas of the community where we have more gun deaths or more gun violence, is to offer saturated patrols. And we'll do this by using the sheriff's office, and we'll also reach out to state police and other agencies that have jurisdiction. I know in Danville at one time they formed a task force where they brought ATF agents in and paired them up with state troopers and with local police officers to work in those areas. Why? Because ATF had resources they could bring to bear that the locals didn't. State police brought us manpower and resources that we already pay for with our state tax dollars. So I would saturate those areas of violence. I would saturate those areas where we have high crime rates and work to eliminate gun violence.
Thanks, sir.
The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.
And this topic will be about the department itself and its employees. What is your plan for the recruitment and retention of Sheriff's Department employees in Henry County? Mr. Hatcher.
Sheriff's Department employees are its greatest resource by far. It's better to retain the employees than it is to have to recruit and train new hires. You don't know what you're getting when you hire somebody. 30 years ago, or 43 years ago, 40 years ago, I say, when I first started at the sheriff's office, there was a waiting list for applicants. When I went to the game department, it took me 18 months to get hired. The recruiting process now, you're seeing a fraction of those numbers apply for these positions. So it's best to try to retain the people that you've invested in. It's best to do the retention. To retain an employee, they have to know that they are appreciated, they have to know that they're being compensated fairly, and they have to have confidence in their leadership. And those are the things that I'm going to bring to the sheriff's office. I'm going to give them the opportunity to do career advancement where they can move in their career choice. They can either go into supervision, or they can stay in patrol or in corrections, and they can move up to a senior or to a master level. We'll build upon the master deputy program that the sheriff's office already has and expand it so that officers don't necessarily have to go into supervision, because let's face it, not every employee is built to be, makes a good supervisor, but you're kind of forced to do that if you ever expect to advance your career track. What I plan to do is offer the employees the opportunity to move up within their ranks to the senior and master levels, so that instead of going into supervision, if they didn't want to, they can continue on their track.
Thank you, sir. And as a follow-up to that one, I'm going to skip down to the second one. I'm not going to ask you if you do everything currently that they're doing, but in what ways do you plan to ensure positive morale and teamwork within the department?
Building on what I just spoke about, working together with teams, making sure that you promote effective leadership, making sure you promote the people that are most effective leaders. The sheriff, in addition to needing to know how the department works and needing to know the laws of the Constitution and the laws of Virginia, also has to be able to recognize talent and has to put the best and most talented people in as their supervisors. I learned from the worst supervisors I've ever had just as much as I did from the best supervisors I ever had. And so, increase morale, you have to put the best people in supervision. And my plan for career advancement, in addition to the supervisory track, will allow me to do just that.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher and Mr. Mills. What is your plan for the recruitment and retention of Sheriff's Department employees here in Henry County?
Yes, sir. When I joined the sheriff's office in 1994, I considered it an honor and it was a privilege to be a part of that department. That was a goal that I had worked hard to attain for years prior to be able to come in. Something that, as far as retention, morale plays a key part in that. You've got to have trust and support. These young officers need to know that they have your support and they can trust you with their ideas, with their concerns. It needs to be a department where you create an atmosphere through training and education, and again, that trust and support. You need to be a leader, an effective leader who listens. They have families. That's a big part of that officer, the complete officer. It's not you're at work as much as you are at home. You've both been there. I've been there too. The family must be taken into consideration, the total welfare of the officer, meet their physical, their mental needs. All of that is part of the total officer.
Thank you, and I'm going to ask you the second part of that question. In what ways do you plan to ensure positive morale and teamwork within the department?
Again, morale, very important. You've got the officer has to feel like they're a part of a family. You are a family. You're a law enforcement family. And that's something you've got to build trust. You've got to continue through reinforcing their ideals to make them a complete officer and feel that they have your support.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And Mr. Davis, what is your plan for the recruitment, retention of Sheriff's Department employees here in Henry County?
In regards to recruitment and retention, I'll say I think we've done a pretty good job, statistically speaking. When you look at agencies across this region, to include the Roanoke Valley, the Lynchburg, they're down over 30%. Here at the Henry County Sheriff's Office, as of today, we're down less than 5%. So that's pretty good in today's recruitment and retention era. I'll bet you other agencies in the Roanoke Valley wish they were only down 5%. So with that being said, we hired almost 90 people at one time to get the new adult detention center up and off the ground. And we've lost some of those deputies. This is a calling. This is a lifelong calling. And many of those people found out that this job wasn't for them. And unfortunately, we had to part ways with some of them, which hurt our numbers, and that's why we're down 5%. But we've done a good job overall. But we're looking at ways to reach our younger groups. We've recently modernized the look of our Facebook page. We're attending more job fairs than ever, and we're reaching out to the youth of our communities to try to get them involved and understand the positive aspects of law enforcement and how much impact that can make on their community and the benefits of making this a career long-term.
Thank you, sir. And in what ways do you plan to ensure positive morale and teamwork within the department?
So working on employee morale is a daily issue. First off, that morale comes when we hire people that know this is not a career for them. Those people will never be happy. So once we recruit the right people and have them in the right place, then they themselves will improve each other's morale. And internally, we've done many things. We've recently partnered with some people in the medical community that will provide enhanced services to them. We'll be announcing that later. Took $37,000 of drug dealer proceeds, and we're completing a new defensive tactics and fitness facilities for all our deputies that will be available for them 24 hours a day. So we encourage them to get into this facility and build a relationship. When they're in there working out together, not only will it be at our adult detention center, our patrol officers will now go there and intermingle our two groups. So these will all be issues that boost morale. They're all employee benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.
What, if any, obviously the taxpayers of Henry County will be the ones repaying this, but I know as part of that new jail, there was some discussion about the Sheriff's Department helping to pay back part of that by the uses that we would use the new jail for. Can you speak to that, please?
In regards to the new adult detention center, there have been some who've tried to allege there are serious issues with the adult detention center, when in fact, that's just not true. Many of the people who will make those allegations have never set foot inside the facility. Those who will make those allegations have never managed a facility of that size, so they have no idea. We've done something that no one else in this region has done, and that has come with some growing pains. Some of those were the recruitment and retention of deputies, which we work daily to improve. And in regards to the fiscal aspect of it, that was merely a speculation or estimate based upon the jail needs study conducted by Mosley Architects. And it estimated about 75 inmates a day could be housed in the new adult detention center to generate revenue. Well, the most recent numbers from the State Compensation Board show that what were previously out of compliance inmates averaged about 6,000 inmates across the Commonwealth of Virginia for the past 2 decades. That number now is about 200 across the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. So not only is the daily population down in the Henry County Adult Detention Center, it's down in every local jail across this Commonwealth. That is a factor beyond our control. We've worked with the city of Martinsville to house some inmates. We are currently housing inmates for them. And we recently completed a contract to house inmates for a federal system. Those will be federal inmates. And if they send those inmates, that contract alone will generate $500,000 in revenue. And we're proud to say that we've made those accomplishments in a short period of time.
And just to follow up to that, also about the adult detention center, obviously it's been in the news a couple times here lately. What do you think can be done to either stop drugs from entering the jail or the overdoses that have happened there from happening inside the jail?
So once again, every correctional facility across this nation has had an issue with narcotics entering their jail. We have the most state-of-the-art technology at the new adult detention center. We have body scanners that scan 3D, yet however, you can't see the small organic particles in those things. So again, these are criminals, and they conspire and devise ways to sneak narcotics into our jail. And although it's rare, it does happen. But the men and women of the Henry County Adult Detention Center are working hard every day to ensure that facility is clean from contraband. And despite what many would tell you, it's impossible. If it were, it wouldn't be a problem across the nation. And no matter who oversees that jail or is on duty that day, you will never stop every single article of contraband from entering that. And no sheriff could ever do so.
And then we'll go to Mr. Hatcher next, again about the adult detention center and about the contracts that we were gonna have in place and about how possibly the sheriff's department could help pay that back. If you want to, 2 minutes.
I agree with some of the statements Mr. Davis made. Anytime I've ever had to expand the department, when I've had to add that number of employees to any department, it comes with growing pains. And you're gonna wash out about 50% of your applicants. And every time I've had to expand my department, I always kept the recruiting process open even after I had all the positions filled, because I knew that I was gonna have to hire some more. So what I did is started a batting order and just ranked the number of employees that came in after the positions were filled. And I did callbacks so that I wouldn't have to wait for the positions to be filled. And I could quickly fill those positions as those employees washed out. To generate the revenue, I agree with what Mr. Davis is doing. He's bringing federal inmates in. He's looking outside to bring additional revenue into the department. The other thing that I would do is I would look to carry over funding within the budget. At the end of the year, which we're approaching, you always have money that's left over. Any projects that you have that you weren't able to complete, I would approach the Board of Supervisors about using that money to offset the budget, whatever the overage is. You don't use that money to go out after special projects when you're upside down on your projected revenue. Now, throwing a dart at a projection is about impossible. Anytime you're building a new facility, that's what it is. You're basically best guessing what it's going to cost to operate this place, what it's going to cost to staff it, what your daily costs are going to be, and what your issues are going to be. You've had the jail open for 1 year. In the next year, you should be able to start pinpointing what your budget's going to be. Going forward, we'll be able to dial it in. But in the next couple of years is when you're going to start to dial it in and not just work off projections. So, because they're upside down on the budget, I don't get as concerned, but what I do concern myself with is the carryover revenues that we could use to apply to offset that deficit. Also look at the initiatives that Mr. Davis has proposed to also help offset that deficit.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. And then the second part of that is, what do you think can be done to stop drugs from entering the jail or the overdoses from happening inside?
Technology is a great thing, but technology is subject to fail. And you're not going to find everything through just the simple use of technology. Look at what other agencies are doing to try to keep narcotics and contraband out of their jails. Look at the state corrections facility. If you work at a DOC facility, you're searched every time you come in and out of the facility. Doesn't make a difference if you're wearing a badge, if you're an inmate, if you're a contractor. You've got to expand your searches, because if drugs are getting into the most secure place in this county, you've got to change your game plan. You can't just rely on technology. You've also got to implement some practical approaches and some old school approaches. Canines in the jail. Yes, they're expensive, but they're also not technological based. So they don't fail as often and sometimes can be more sensitive. But you've got to expand your searches. You've got to expand the searches and within the jail to try to get this contraband out of the cells, out of the prisoners' hands, and keep them safe while they're incarcerated.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Mr. Mills, same question to you about the new adult detention center and ways to maybe generate revenue and help pay that back.
Yes, sir. Henry County is very fortunate to have the state-of-the-art, modern adult detention center. That's a $72 million facility, and it's designed for education. It's designed for rehabilitation of the inmates. I've spoken with different groups on reentry programs to help curb some of the recidivism of inmates coming in and out of the detention center, and the jail is set up to do that. As far as training inside the jail to curb drugs and contraband coming into the jail, that comes from direct supervision. It comes from proper leadership, veteran officers who are willing to spend time with these young officers. The jail is a training ground. For most of them, that's their first experience in law enforcement. You need to have direct supervision with them. You need to have veteran officers who are willing to take time and train and show them effective ways to handle the inmates, the contraband that could potentially be coming in. And I just spoke with someone today about the use of a canine in the jail. And I realize it's expensive, but it can be an efficient tool. The technology that's in place, that's part of it. But it comes back on proper training and supervision of the officers doing the searches for the contraband within the jail. As far as revenue, the idea of federal inmates, at some point, I like that idea. I like that idea. You've got a young jail staff. You've got a lot of turnover. They need to be trained. They need to be ready for that type of inmate. That's a different breed of inmate. Their mindset's different. You can look to local jurisdictions who may need bed space and housing. Pittsylvania County, Franklin County, the city of Martinsville. Those would all be options.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
Yes, sir.
And just quickly, I think you touched on the second part in your answer, unless you'd like some more time. That would, okay.
The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.
And so you know this is a Republican-sponsored meeting. And so we're going to have, these are questions from our committee members. So these are constitutional and national issues that do affect us locally, because you'll be asked to enforce possibly some of these issues. In light of the Second Amendment to the Constitution, if there were to be a law passed at either the state or the federal level to confiscate guns of any kind that are currently legal, would you enforce it? And we will start that with Mr. Hatcher.
Let me first say that I'm pro-Second Amendment. Henry County is a pro-Second Amendment county, and part of my job as sheriff is to make sure that I reflect those values as I serve. If there were a state law passed that said that we confiscated any firearm, it would have to supersede the Constitution and would make it unlawful. So I would not enforce that law.
And as a second follow-up question, I assume those would probably be pretty quick. What will be your office's policy on how to deal with illegal aliens that have been arrested, and are you aware of how those situations are currently handled?
Illegal aliens that are arrested in the community would be handled the same as they currently are. They would be incarcerated and jailed. We would notify immigration that they are in the jail, and we would wait for their response. They would have to serve their sentence. They would have to go to court. They could be tried. They could be convicted. Prior to the release, you have to notify Immigration Services of their pending release. Immigration has the responsibility to notify you that you need to hold on to this person or need to hold this immigrant, and it's their responsibility to come get them after a set amount of time. If they don't come and get them, then of course you have to release them. But if they do have a pickup order, then you hold them until they're picked up.
Thank you, sir. And I'll go to Mr. Mills. In light of the Second Amendment to the Constitution, if there were to be a law passed at either the state or the federal level to confiscate guns of any kind that are currently legal, would you enforce it?
As a gun owner, and I am pro Second Amendment, I believe in your right to bear arms and to defend yourself accordingly, unless there was an amendment to the Constitution. I don't see any reason why those weapons should be confiscated.
What will your office's policy be on how to deal with illegal aliens that have been arrested, and are you aware of how those situations are handled currently?
Now, I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Hatcher there. They've committed a crime in this jurisdiction. They're responsible for their actions. Immigration would be notified, and we'd wait on the proper response from immigration. But their debt for that crime to this jurisdiction would have to be paid here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mills. And to Mr. Davis, in light of the Second Amendment to the Constitution, if there were to be a law passed at either state or the federal level to confiscate guns of any kind that are currently legal, would you enforce it? Mr. Davis.
I am most certainly a pro-Second Amendment candidate. I believe in the constitutional right of every citizen. That includes their Second Amendment right. And in fact, I'm the owner of a small firearms business, and I hold a federal firearms license. On June 27, 1997, the United States Supreme Court decided Prince v. U.S., and that court ruling declared the Brady Bill unconstitutional. That decision was monumental, and part of that ruling states that the federal government cannot use the state or local officers to do their bidding. And that Supreme Court ruling states no less than 3 times that the states are not subject to federal direction. And with that being said, as your sheriff, no Henry County deputy will participate in any level of gun confiscation.
And the second question, what will your office's policy be on how to deal with illegal aliens that have been arrested, and are you aware of how those situations are handled currently?
So being a local law enforcement agency, and we're confined to what the state law, the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia say, there's little to no interpretation for us on illegal aliens. We arrest them as we would any other citizen. We hold them in the adult detention center, and should the federal government choose to deport them or prosecute them otherwise, we will fully support that.
Thank you, sir.
The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.
All right, my last question. As a business owner, and you know, it's cool when you're a business owner because you can give yourself whatever title you want. So as a CEO, no, I'm kidding. You know, the sheriff is the top leader, the executive management for that department. So as that, he oversees a large multi-million-dollar budget, supervises hundreds of employees. What in your past experience qualifies you to oversee a budget that large and to lead that many employees? And Mr. Mills, I'm gonna go to you first, sir.
Now, I cannot honestly say that I've overseen a multi-million-dollar budget. A bit hard to comprehend, but No different than managing your home budget. No different than managing the budget for the nonprofit that I've been with since my retirement in 2019. That is a six-figure budget, not on the same level as a multi-million-dollar budget, I know. But the same principles apply. You need to be good stewards of your funding. You need to spend your money wisely. As far as, I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of the question. Sure. As far as leading that many employees, I know the sheriff's office is around a little over 200 employees. With the nonprofit, I've managed and coordinated volunteer services and activities for 40 to 60 volunteers. Like I said, the sheriff is not alone in his duties and operating the office. He must ensure that he has good people around him to help make sure things run efficiently, and they function for the betterment of the citizens of Henry County.
Thank you, sir. And I will go to Mr. Davis second on that one. The sheriff is the CEO of the Sheriff's Department that oversees a large multi-million-dollar budget and supervises hundreds of employees. What in your past experience qualifies you to oversee a budget that large and to lead that many employees? Thank you, sir. 2 minutes.
So again, I've spent my entire career at the sheriff's office, so all my experience stems from there. And fortunately, I've been part of the sheriff's administrative staff for 7 years. During that 7 years, I got to see the budgeting process, participate in the budgeting process, and have a general understanding of that budgeting process. As I've progressed through the ranks, that knowledge has grown. And before our former chief deputy, Steve Ings, left, he took the time to go through the budgeting cycle, show us the ins and outs, and explain that to us. So I have a good general understanding of the $21 million budget that the Henry County Sheriff's Office handles annually.
Thank you, sir. And the employees would be the second part.
So again, I currently serve as the chief deputy at the Henry County Sheriff's Office. So I have experience that no other candidate has. I currently supervise the 230 plus employees and all the first line supervisors, middle managers, and everyone in between. So I'm intimately familiar with every facet of the sheriff's office and the daily operations.
Thanks, sir. And Mr. Hatcher, same question. Sheriff's the CEO of the Sheriff's Department, oversees a large multi-million-dollar budget, supervises hundreds of employees. What in your past experience qualifies you to oversee a budget that large and to lead that many employees? Thanks, sir. 2 minutes.
I'm one of the few candidates that's actually served as a CEO in a county department. I've managed a county department, and I've had to prepare budgets and go through the budgetary process. A $21 million budget, no, I have not. But we're still throwing darts at that number, but it has increased. Sheriff's Department budget doubled overnight as soon as they opened the jail. It's a monumental task for anyone to try to maintain. But the thing you've got to remember as CEO is that, yes, I'm in charge of the department. I have to prepare that budget. I have to make sure that budget is accurate and that it reflects what our actual duties will be. But then I also have to go to the Board of Supervisors. I have to sell my ideas to the Board of Supervisors, and I have to get their permission for the funding that it takes that I've requested. So in addition to being the CEO, I also have to be a salesman, because I have to make sure that what I propose they agree with so that I can get the funding. Because if I do not do my job correctly, then the entire department's going to suffer, the entire community's going to suffer, because I'm going to underfund it, some items, or I may overfund others. But the thing to remember is that even as the CEO, I still don't get to allocate the money. That has to come from the board.
The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.
If you have your closing argument or your closing statement, I will allow you to go first if you'd like to begin.
So one of the questions I was asked is, why do I want to become sheriff? And I think I admitted it from my opening. and so I'm going to answer that now. One of the reasons why I want to become sheriff is because it's something I've wanted to do for decades. Since I left the sheriff's office and went to the state, I've got the opportunity to work with both good and bad sheriff's departments throughout the entire state. I've got to see their experiences, see what would work, what doesn't work, and compare it to what I knew from Henry County when I worked at the sheriff's department here. I can bring other ideas, outside ideas to this department, and ideas that I've seen that worked in other areas. So that's one of the benefits that I bring to the department. I understand I'm an employee of the people, that I serve the citizens of the county, and that I have to do my job correctly to protect the people that work for me and the citizens that I serve. Some of the best sheriffs I've ever worked with weren't necessarily the best police officers I ever worked with. But they understood management principles, they understood motivation, and they understood leadership. And that's something that I bring to the job. In order to manage volunteers, in order to lead volunteers, you have to understand that you have to do that from the front. A great instructor one time told me, he's now a judge in Bedford County, but told me one time that when it comes to volunteers, it comes to employees, that you can't lead from the back. As an example, he tried to push a rope across the table. All it ever did is bend around. But he could pull that rope anywhere because he was a good leader, he was a good manager, and he was an outstanding teacher. Gave great examples. I treat people with respect. I treat my employees with respect. I always have, and I have a history of doing that. I'm honest, and I speak my mind. Some people consider that a detriment. I consider it a plus. And those are the things that I expect from the people that I serve. Be open and honest with me. Tell me what kind of job we're doing. Give us feedback. Because one of the things that I will bring to the sheriff's office is open doors. I want to incorporate a Citizens Police Academy into the sheriff's office, a way for the public to come in and see from the inside out how our department will operate. I want to show them what it's like to be a police officer, the training and the types of training that we go through. Because it's only from walking in a mile in our shoes that they'll begin to understand that. The other thing it does is it opens up positive interaction between the community and the officers. A one-on-one environment that you don't get every day. The opportunity for them to express their ideas and their opinions about how the department runs, the things that we do well, and the things that we could do better. And it's only through that open and honest communication that we'll succeed. So I bring different ideas to the department. One thing that I hear throughout the entire community is they weren't comfortable with the way the last sheriff was selected. That it was someone who was selected for us instead of us being able to vote for. People will say they won't change. I'm the only candidate that's running that offers true change. Because I didn't grow up in this department, my career wasn't based around this department, and my observations are both from the outside and from the inside of the department. So as sheriff, I will use all of those skills and abilities to make this the greatest department in the state. One thing you can count on is my name is my word. If I didn't think I could be a good sheriff, and I didn't think I was qualified to be sheriff, and when I couldn't make this department excel, I would never stand here in front of you and ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Hatcher, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. And with that, Mr. Mills, if you'd like to make your closing statement.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. And I honestly feel like a man's service to his country and to his community speaks volumes about his character. Through my life experience and training in the military and with the sheriff's office, I feel like I'm more than qualified to be that leader, to bring the department forward, to make positive change, not just change for the sake of change, but positive change. Change that benefits the department, change that benefits our community, a work ethic that's strong, support for my fellow officers that spills over into a positive job performance for them that spills over into the community. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had to work with the Sheriff's Office. And again, it was a privilege. It was an honor. I can remember Captain Dotson telling me when I was hired, he said, "Welcome to the fishbowl." And he was right. Everything you do, everything you say, someone's going to see it. You'll hear it again. And he made it very clear to live your life accordingly. And I've done that. I've tried to live my life according to those words of wisdom. It hit home with me. So with that, I would be proud to serve as your sheriff in the coming years. Thank you very much.
And thank you as well, Mr. Mills, for being here and taking the time to speak to this group. And then lastly, if you would like to give your closing remark, Mr. Davis.
So tonight and throughout this campaign, we've heard the term change. But what we haven't heard is a set of actionable steps to accomplish any change goals. My mission is one of improvement. In fact, in 2016, I first began considering a run for sheriff. And it was at that point I took it upon myself to not just know my job duties, but learn every facet of the Henry County Sheriff's Office. Upon announcing I would run for sheriff, I immediately went to work to identify areas that we could be improved upon to better serve the citizens of this community. My team and I, we recognized those areas and we're working to implement new plans quickly. And first on the agenda was the implementation of a school resource officer in every Henry County school. And we completed that project in record speed. And how did we do that? We used a team approach. We brought every stakeholder to the table: the Henry County School Board, the Henry County Public Schools, the Board of Supervisors, and all members of the Henry County Sheriff's Office. And we accomplished that goal. The SROs that we have placed in the schools will not only be there for their safety, but they will ensure the schools are a safe place. But they will be role models, mentors, and they will forge and build relationships with these children from the kindergarten level up. Other programs that are already in progress and on the way to better serve this community include: next month, I'm proud to say, we will graduate 3 deputies from the DARE program, and for the first time in over 20 years, we will put DARE back into the Henry County schools. Because I know in my heart and I believe it is absolutely essential to educate our youth about the dangers of drugs. And this modern DARE program covers so much more. It covers social media danger, anti-bullying, and many other things that our youth need. And that is going to happen. That is an actionable step that is in progress. I took it upon myself to partner with Texas A&M University in their ALERT program, and we built a team of active shooter instructors that will present the civilian response to active shooter emergencies to anyone in this community who wants it. And in fact, in the pilot program, I myself have gone into the schools and houses of worship and educated several hundred citizens of this community. And that will be made available to all local institutions soon. Beginning in July, we will go online with a whole series, an array of information that's searchable. We will allow citizens to complete online reporting to save you time should you choose to do so. And this will better serve our citizens. It will create transparency in our data, and it will also help our media partners. We've initiated a public-private partnership to reduce a very specific type of larceny with some businesses in our community. And again, we will launch that in January, and there will be much more information. We're in the process of completing a defensive tactics and physical fitness training facility for all our deputies. This will enable us to bridge a gap in training that we identified, and it will also promote healthier deputies and overall officer wellness, which will ultimately benefit every citizen of this community. And that was done at no cost to the taxpayer. That was paid for by drug dealer proceeds. I'll use funding from the recently approved $361,000 grant to bring modern, cutting-edge tools to Henry County to combat violent crime. And we'll fight harder than ever to remove drug dealers from our communities. I'll work with our legislators in Richmond to seek laws with true teeth and minimum mandatory sentencing to punish criminals who prey on our citizens in these communities. There are minimum standards to run for sheriff. I not only meet those standards, I exceed them. In fact, I believe I'm the only certified law enforcement officer running for sheriff. I have the most experience of the candidates in this sheriff's race. Not only have I been a leader, but I've served alongside the men and women of the sheriff's office, and I have led them from the front. I've never asked a deputy to do anything that I wasn't willing to do myself. As your captain of investigations, I supervised nearly every major case that occurred in Henry County since the year 2016. And as your SWAT commander, in the past 7 years, I planned and I led from the front 60 high-risk tactical operations. Each of those were successful and not one person was hurt. And I went into each of those dangerous situations alongside those brave deputies. I didn't just ask them to do something, I led the way. And this is leadership under pressure. And this is something no other candidate has experienced. And it's because of these leadership opportunities and my willingness to work alongside the men and women of the Henry County Sheriff's Office that I will overwhelmingly carry the support of every man and woman who works inside the Henry County Sheriff's Office. It's been said by some recently that great leaders don't have to know everything. They just have to have the right people in the right places. Well, in addition to my own knowledge base, I also have that with my administrative staff. And I'm going to do something that my challengers haven't offered to do. My administrative staff will be public because they are here to serve you. We have a combined total of 152 years of experience spanning every area of the Henry County Sheriff's Office. This will be the only administrative team that has experience supervising the 230 plus employees, the operations of the new adult detention center, and a $21 million budget. Law enforcement and corrections are ever evolving at a rapid pace. And with my team and I still performing these duties daily, no one can be as up to date on modern best practices as we are. We will put ourselves above no man. We will be accountable and transparent from the top down. We will have transparency in our communications and processes. I'll treat every citizen fairly. I have not allowed the sun to set on my career. In fact, it's just getting started. On July 1st, I will become the next sheriff of Henry County. I will serve with honor, courage, distinction, and sacrifice, and be relentless in the path to justice and a dedication to excellence. And it's truly with a servant's heart that I choose to run for sheriff. And I ask every citizen for their vote on November the 7th, and that will be a vote for experience and true proven leadership.
So thank you so much to all of our candidates, our media partners, and for all of you for being here.
The Henry County Sheriff Candidates Forum, hosted by Martinsville Henry County Republican Committee, is sponsored by Homes by Amy and Company, KW Martinsville. Whether buying, selling, or staging, they are the way to go. Call them at 276-788-SOLD.